When you're about to say something or do something that's going to make the situation worse, we advise people to go to the balcony.
The holidays are coming and it is such a mixed bag because it's this joyful, wonderful time. And it's also kind of high pressure because we want our meals and our time of connecting with family to go great. And yet it's kind of emotionally charged.
Hmm.
So I want to talk to you today about how we can handle a very specific kind of negotiation, and
Mm.
that's difficult personalities at our holiday tables. So the first difficult personality I want to talk to you about is something you call the know-it-all.
Hmm. Yeah.
Describe to us what this character is like.
So I think it's probably fair to say most of us have a relative who has an answer to everything. If they happen to work in sales, they know how to solve, the war in Iraq or whatever. And so they have a personality where there's a very strong sense that they need to be seen as right and knowledgeable. And so, they've got an opinion on everything, and they're not afraid to express it. So they're a difficult, challenging kind of person to deal with. Um, Part of it is to sort of say, well, okay, so I know this person is like this. This is their tendency. So maybe I should just let them share their perspective and take it in and not feel like I have to correct them or tell them why they're wrong, because that's when things sort of escalate out of control. So it's a bit of an ego thing on your part to say, okay, so we're going to let Uncle Chuck just tell us his perspective on things and take it in.
Yeah. Probably anticipating that that's going to get on my nerves would help me to prepare and say, okay, when that thing happens, I have a strategy
Right.
and pull the strategy out that I've already committed to ahead of time.
I think so. And it's not like Uncle Chuck is ever going to change. He's not going to be different. So what are you going to do differently? For me, a lot of these things again rest with us. And I once had a student who said to me, every time I go into my boss's office, he says this, and it drives me crazy. What do I do? And I said, don't expect your boss to change. You need to figure out how you're going to respond to that differently. And so a lot of this, falls to us to figure out how to manage.
Is there any time we should bail out and not just kind of try to appease them?
You know what? So there's a concept that we talk about a lot in negotiation called going to the balcony, which just simply means to step away. When you're about to say something or do something that's going to make the situation worse, we advise people to go to the balcony. And the balcony can be just a short trip where you remove yourself from the situation temporarily and then come back to it in a way that perhaps would be a little more productive. And there's a great quote by a guy named Ambrose Bierce, who's an American humorist, who said, when angry, you'll make the best speech you'll ever regret. And so the balcony is sort of designed to prevent you from making that speech. So I think, if you're feeling your blood pressure rising, it might not be bad to go and, get another cup of eggnog and, ask yourself, why does this matter? Why is this driving you so crazy? And then think about how you want to reply.
There's one more type of personality that you share specific tactics for dealing with, and that is the sensitive clam. So tell
Mm-hmm.
us about this type of character we might find at our holiday gathering.
Yeah, so the sensitive clam, they kind of, at the first sign of any conflict or the first sign of any criticism or critique, they sort of pull into their shell, and it's very hard to get in there. There's a lot of grit and sand that goes with them, and so they kind of stay in there, and it's pretty difficult to get them out. Um, One way that I found to get them out is that they usually trust somebody in your family, and so you need to have that person be the messenger to go over and be like, hey, it's not the end of the world. Like, they weren't criticizing you as a person. They were just perhaps taking issue with a perspective you hold. So come on back to the table. It's not the end of the world, that kind of thing. So the messenger matters sometimes. And you have to recognize perhaps that as well, that sometimes you're not the best messenger for every conversation, but find the one that is. So maybe it's Aunt Melly, who everyone loves and is the warm aunt with the gray hair and who knows what. I do think it's disappointing that we are now in a mode where we don't talk about important subjects like politics and religion and things like that. And I think that setting out a few ground rules, even if you don't call them ground rules, can be helpful. So, there are times when I will just say to folks, hey, you know what, like, let's not try to change each other's minds. Like, just share your perspective. Don't expect a reply from me. It goes to, what's the purpose of the conversation? If you're trying to change me from a Democrat to a Republican or whatever, it's not going to work. So let's not do that. But let's actually go down the road of saying, I wonder if Aunt Frida has something that I can actually learn today. And I'm going to listen to her from her own experiences and things along those lines.
Could you share with us a conversation that you've had where you did broach a potentially inflammatory subject and have a successful just exchange of information without that escalation?
So I recently had a conversation with a family member about the Colin Kaepernick situation. And I don't want to assume everybody knows what that is. So I'll just say briefly that Colin Kaepernick is a former NFL quarterback who was taking a knee during the anthem to protest what he saw as police brutality in communities of color. And this family member and I didn't agree on the situation. He believed he should stand, and I thought he had every right to peacefully protest. And we talked about why, and I explained, because in part of my graduate studies and things, I had learned about nonviolent protest and about how you use symbols as a way of getting people's attention and drawing attention to certain things. And when I shared that, he had not heard of that before, but also, interestingly enough, we had a very interesting conversation. And we both walked away not necessarily agreeing with each other, but being okay with the fact that they saw it one way and that was reasonable, and that I saw it a different way, and that was also reasonable. And we took away a few nuggets as to why.
Are there any other pointers that you have, especially when it comes to political debates, for how we might communicate our views? Again, not with the purpose of changing the other person, but just in a way that's maybe puts them less on the defensive.
Well, I think, first of all, there are two kinds of conversations. One is a debate mode and one is dialogue mode. So debate mode is when I'm listening for the holes in your argument and then I poke a hole in it. I find that and I run with it and try to, break you down, if you will. Dialoguing is actually about, listening to learn and to try to understand, why is it that somebody believes that. And I think that if you can get into more of a why conversation, so why does that bother you so much, or why is that it's so important to you? Because usually what happens is somebody will say this, and then somebody will just shoot back, and it becomes sort of what we would call a very positional conversation that never gets at, why does that matter to you? Like, why do you feel that, for example, like that globalization has taken away jobs? Like, do you think that there are jobs in the heartland of America that would come back if there was a different way of doing this, right? So now you're beginning to break the conversation down into component parts and understand what's really the problem. And I think, I've had some conversations with folks, for example, who hold that perspective. And I've, for many of them, they want to go back to a life where, like their parents who grew up in a small town and they worked at the mill and they had their house and their white picket fence and their 2.5 kids. And that's a world that they grew up in and that they love. And that world in many ways has changed, right? So I can understand the desire to go back to something like that. Is it possible? I don't know. But at least I can understand where they're coming from in that desire and wanting to have that, for example.
I'm excited about this conversation because I think it could really elevate the conversation around the holiday tables this year for a few people, just with these small shifts in perspective.
I hope so. And frankly, honestly, to me, that's all a lot of this is are small shifts in perspective and new ways of thinking about what it is that you're doing. We sort of have to work hard every day to make life work and to make all of these things happen. And if you can see a slight shift or a slight change, it makes a big difference.
That's exactly what I was thinking too, is that as hard as it is, it's probably the most rewarding work we can do.
Well, think about the things that you remember, right? A lot of them have to do with people and experiences and situations where you've worked through a problem or you've dealt with something. Those become our most memorable experiences.
Well, thank you, Dr. Weiss, so much for sharing with us about something that can impact us in such a special way with our families.
My pleasure.